What was the essence of endurance when liberty was stripped away and sustenance required constant struggle? The provisions enslaved people preserved emerged from deprivation, shaped by resilience and determination. What narratives persist in their creations? Peanut stew featuring foraged snails represented nourishment that embodied resilience, perseverance, and ancestral knowledge. When protein was unattainable or too valuable to consume, communities relied upon the earth for sustenance. Wild snails collected following rainfall provided the solution to starvation, their casings gleaming in the moist soil. They were washed, parboiled, and cooked gradually in a mixture created from ground peanuts. The goober, having established strong roots in the terrain and spirit of the region following its extensive voyage from West Africa. The fragrance that permeated the atmosphere was loamy and full-bodied, conveying the identical warmth discovered throughout successive eras of hearths from Sierra Leone to South Carolina. This stew represented more than sustenance. It embodied persistence transformed into taste. Preparing it demanded time, attention, and an awareness that endurance meant converting the most basic ingredients into solace. Those who consumed it experienced both adversity and cleverness in each spoonful. Ember-roasted corn ears served as the quintessential field provision created from requirement and flame. When vessels for cooking were inaccessible, enslaved individuals wrapped complete corn ears in husks and placed them deep within hot embers until the grains softened and caramelized. It represented nourishment that could be transported, bundled in fabric, or carried, consumed quietly between toil and respite. The subtle char from the embers imparted the corn a smoked richness that remained long beyond the final kernel was finished. In fields where starvation loomed large, this was persistence cloaked as plainness. Nourishment requiring no implement, no extravagance, merely heat and forbearance. Even following emancipation, many continued roasting corn this manner, a subdued legacy of ingenuity. What started as a method of persistence became remembrance, transmitted through flavor, and the scent of scorching husk. Persimmon leather represented a confection derived from deprivation, created when sweetener was an aspiration beyond grasp. Wild persimmons, tender and amber when mature, were collected manually and crushed into pulp, their acidity transforming into profound syrupy essence as they dehydrated beneath the southern sun. Distributed thinly on planks or fabric, the pulp solidified into pliable sheets that could endure for months, folded and preserved for the harsh winter approaching. It was confection created through patience, nourishment compressed into a form that would not decay. The procedure itself was tranquil labor, frequently performed at the margins of daylight, each portion a modest resistance against starvation. When the frost arrived and provisions were limited, a piece of persimmon leather could elevate morale and ease hunger's bite. In its confection resided a truth. Endurance does not invariably mean harshness. Sometimes it resembles sunshine captured in fruit. Pine bark infusion was among the most ancient treatments in the collection of endurance, steeped from the inner bark of pine trees. When other sustenance was depleted, the bark was peeled, simmered in water until the liquid became deep amber and consumed to combat scurvy, illness, or the cold of relentless labor. It possessed a harsh, piney taste, acrid yet oddly reassuring to those who understood it well. The infusion provided vitality when nothing else would, its heat drawing a path from the woodland to the soul. For those refused treatment and reprieve, this modest brew became both remedy and solace. It served as a testament that the earth itself could offer restoration, even when people were stripped of every other means. Pine bark infusion was not merely beverage, it was evidence that wisdom transferred from African and indigenous ancestors alike could transform even bark into vitality. Chinquapin nut flower represented a covert reservoir of vitality concealed in plain view among the forest. The chinquapin, a relative of the chestnut, yielded small, delicate nuts that could be harvested in autumn and pulverized into a fine powder. Enslaved households crushed them using rocks, dehydrating the flower in the sunlight to preserve for months. When grain was unattainable to acquire, this nut flour became loaves, gruel, and binder simultaneously. It was effortless to transport but laden with nourishment, a sustenance food that maintained stomachs satisfied during brutal winters or extended treks. The flavor was loamy, creamy, subtly sweet, a testament that even the tiniest offerings in nature possessed might. The chinquapin tree itself became a wordless companion, standing in the backdrop of endurance narratives scarcely acknowledged. Each portion of its flower represented a modest triumph against starvation and adversity. Preserved watermelon rind embodied the essence of creating value from waste, a flawless illustration of the resourcefulness that maintained existence under unimaginable conditions. The succulent crimson flesh of the melon was consumed rapidly, but the ivory rind, typically thrown away, was trimmed, sliced, and simmered in vinegar with cloves and sweetener until transparent. Kept in vessels, it became crunchy, acidic, and invigorating, a delicacy that persisted long beyond harvest. It represented both conservation and rebellion, converting remnants into nourishment. This deed of retaining every fragment of what little was accessible revealed a reality. Endurance was not merely about perseverance, but about imagination. These vessels lined kitchen racks like silent monuments, shimmering testaments that squandering was a luxury few could possess. Even today, a single morsel of preserved rind conveys that heritage, sugary, tart, and intact. Roasted corn brew was the essence of fortitude in a vessel. When genuine coffee was unattainable, enslaved communities toasted corn grains in iron vessels until they became dark brown, then pulverized them into a rough powder and infused it in hot water. The beverage was charred, loamy, and mildly sweet, a modest reflection of the indulgence drink withheld from them. It provided heat in the dawn hours before sunrise when toil commenced and the chill penetrated through sparse garments. Roasted corn brew was both requirement and ceremony, a means to confront the day with something that felt human, honorable, and collective. It was prepared from what the land offered willingly, validation that solace could still be fashioned from deprivation. In its harshness was a flavor of persistence and perhaps subdued resistance too. Wild honeycomb preservation was as near as endurance ever approached to confection. Discovering a colony in the forest was an act of fortune and bravery. Gathering it demanded smoke, forbearance, and hands prepared to accept suffering. The honeycomb was enclosed in foliage or contained in clay vessels to maintain it for months. A single teaspoon could enhance cornmeal, calm a painful throat, or provide as a child's uncommon indulgence. Honey was a restorative, a gift, a testament that even in difficulty, nature bestowed mercy. It shimmered amber in faint illumination, viscous and aromatic, its essence pure as daylight. For those who withstood deprivation, it was a wonder worth safeguarding. A container of wild honey was beyond sustenance. It was existence itself, secured and preserved for the moments when sweetness seemed distant. Toasted acorn paste was among the initial teachings in conversion, how something harsh could be rendered palatable. Acorns collected from the woodland ground were immersed for days to eliminate their sharp tannins, then pulverized, roasted, and blended into gruel or patties. The labor was gradual, but the outcome was nutritious, substantial, and satisfying enough to endure through the most demanding toil. It possessed the profound earthy aroma of the forest and a taste dissimilar to anything from a market shelf today. Creating acorn paste demanded forbearance and understanding, transmitted through successive eras, merging African method with native intelligence. It was endurance as artistry, every phase intentional, every morsel deserved. For those who existed on the brink of starvation, this modest nourishment was both defense and vigor. It demonstrated that what others disregarded could transform into a banquet in the proper hands. Cypress root infusion was remedy derived from requirement and insight. When physicians and treatments were beyond access, the roots of the cypress tree became physician and promise. Simmered into a dark aromatic tea, it was employed to relieve fever, discomfort, and inflammation, its aroma permeating dwellings with loamy tranquility. The formula originated from collective understanding. African botanical practice merged with indigenous custom. It was potent, nearly acrid, but it functioned, and that was sufficient. Preparing it meant relying upon the earth, believing it to replenish what brutality and fatigue had extracted. Every cup was a subdued deed of compassion in a world constructed on privation. It did not remedy everything, but it reminded those who consumed it that restoration could still prevail where liberty did not. Dehydrated pumpkin strands embodied a testament of forbearance and pragmatism, a method to extend one harvest into numerous months of nourishment. Ribbons of pumpkin flesh were sliced slender with weathered blades and suspended near the hearth to dry, coiling into extended strands that stiffened in the smoke and warmth. These cords could be preserved for months, awaiting to be added into stews to enrich liquid or dissolve into gruel. Pumpkin was abundant following harvest, but fresh vegetation never persisted long, particularly under the burden of compelled toil and restricted access to ground. Dehydrating it was the solution, converting something temporary into something lasting. The subtle confection of reconstituted pumpkin contributed richness to meals composed mostly from grains or tubers. The strands dangled from beams like wreaths of endurance, vivid orange testaments that preparation and ingenuity were as precious as any seasoning. It was sustenance that conveyed remembrance and the subdued resolve of those who declined to perish. Sun-baked earthen vessel legumes were created from cleverness and requirement, gradually cooked by the ground itself when fuel was limited or prohibited. Legumes were immersed overnight, contained in earthen vessels with liquid, botanicals, and fragments of grease if they were fortunate enough to possess some. The vessels were placed shallow in sun-heated earth or positioned near glowing coals to prepare gradually through the day. The outcome was supple, charred legumes that possessed the essence of the terrain and the fortitude of those who prepared them. Preparing this manner conserved vital wood and prevented smoke from revealing their flames. It was silent preparation, cautious preparation, derived from both intelligence and the need to persist undetected. When the vessels were excavated at twilight, the legumes were substantial enough to nourish multiple people, satisfying the stomach and fortifying the spirit. In a world constructed on extracting, this was a modest deed of preserving, of creating something wholesome from the heat of the soil itself. Sorrel leaf infusion was an explosion of crimson zest in a world that frequently provided minimal hue or solace. Created from dried hibiscus-like foliage, the infusion was both beverage and remedy, invigorating in warmth, purifying in sickness, and uplifting in mood. It originated from profound origins in West Africa, where the beverage was recognized as bissap, and it traversed the ocean in remembrance long before it ever arrived on American terrain. Simmered with ginger or citrus rind when accessible, it transformed liquid into something hallowed, luminous, and vibrant. For enslaved communities, it was an uncommon essence of homeland, a sip that connected them to forebears and territory across the waters. It was acidic, robust, and intensely crimson, the shade of persistence itself. Even when prepared from wild sorrel instead of imported hibiscus, the character remained identical, a testament that taste and selfhood could not be erased, only transformed. Coontie root powder was among the most unusual forms of sustenance food extracted from the sandy earth of Florida's coastal wilderness. The coantie, or Florida arrowroot, contained starch deep within its roots, but it was also poisonous until meticulously treated. Enslaved communities discovered how to shred the roots, submerge them in flowing water for days, and dehydrate the pulp into a refined powder. The procedure was arduous and precise, but the outcome was invaluable. A pure, consumable flour that could be utilized in loaves, gruel, or porridge. It was a carbohydrate supply for when nothing else existed, maintaining existence in periods of starvation or seclusion. Each portion was a triumph of understanding over peril, of forbearance over starvation. The capability to prepare it safely originated from successive eras of collective intelligence transferred quietly between workers. To convert toxin into sustenance was not merely endurance, it was brilliance derived from requirement. Frog limb stock was not a luxury then, but a supply discovered in the marshlands where starvation encountered possibility. In low-region wetlands and waterfronts, frogs were abundant and simple to capture at night with flames or bare palms. Their limbs, though modest, were laden with protein, and their bones provided essence to stocks enriched with tubers or cornmeal. It was a dish of the wetland, modest but nourishing. Simmered with wild onions or botanicals, it yielded a delicate, flavorful broth that calmed hollow stomachs and relieved exhaustion. Children were frequently the ones dispatched to capture frogs, converting amusement into survival labor. It was sustenance that demanded bravery and resourcefulness in equal proportion, validation that existence could be extracted from even the tiniest, most tranquil niches of the natural realm. Frog limb stock may not have been elegant, but it was a dish that maintained people vigorous enough to witness another dawn. Salt-cured greens were a brilliant method to retain summer's harvest. Long beyond the fields went barren. Collards, mustard greens, and turnip tops were layered into wooden casks, saturated with salted water, pressed down with rocks, and secured firmly. Over weeks, the foliage relaxed and cultured slightly, acquiring a zesty essence that enlivened the most monotonous winter dish. They could be washed and prepared with fat, onions, or whatever remnants were accessible. This straightforward technique maintained nutrients viable in periods when fresh produce was unattainable to locate. The aroma that emerged when the casks were unsealed was pungent, loamy, and reassuring, a flavor of summer restored in the depths of winter. In dwellings that possessed little, these casks embodied protection against starvation. Creating them demanded forbearance and exactness, the variety of subdued restraint that endurance required. The casks bordered cabin corners like soundless sentinels against hunger, awaiting patiently until their contents were required. In every home that depended on them, salted greens became an emblem of preparation and attention. Another manner, the enslaved converted adversity into sustenance, validation that even duration itself could be manipulated toward survival when directed by intelligence and determination. Sassafras bark flavoring was among the initial seasonings employed when commercial spices were beyond grasp. The roots and bark of the sassafras tree were stripped, dehydrated, and pulverized into powder, its fragrance abundant with heat and spice. Scattered over cornmeal or legumes, it converted ordinary food into something aromatic and gratifying. Beyond flavor, sassafras possessed therapeutic worth too. It calmed inflamed throats, alleviated stomach discomfort, and was thought to purify the blood. Its application originated from a fusion of African and native customs, a mutual recognition that seasoning could also restore. For those whose daily dishes were frequently tasteless or monotonous, this bark delivered a trace of delight. Even the tiniest pinch seemed like an indulgence. When introduced to bubbling vessels, the atmosphere would permeate with its forest aroma, an instant of beauty amid deprivation. Households protected small sachets of ground bark like riches, transmitting the practice from one generation to the following. In eras when honor was confiscated, flavoring food became a subdued means to recover it. Sassafras was beyond seasoning. It was essence made consumable, a testament that even the most basic flavor could convey remembrance, heritage, and fortitude. Pulverized oyster shell calcium was endurance resourcefulness masked as science. Oysters plentiful along the southern shoreline offered more than sustenance. Their casings were incinerated or milled to create lime, which could be employed to preserve meats, maintain vegetables, or supplement diets deficient in calcium. The procedure was gradual and hazy. Casings gathered, pulverized, and warmed until they became white and fragile. The powder that persisted was blended into brine or applied onto food before storage. It could even be utilized to brighten walls or repair small fissures in chimneys, converting refuse into practicality in every aspect. For those refused access to medical treatment or adequate nutrition, this modest material provided health and conservation alike. The aroma of burning casings remained in the atmosphere, designating the convergence of adversity and innovation. It was the discipline of requirement, created not in research facilities, but in the open atmosphere by those who discovered to interpret nature's principles through necessity. Even refuse became supply. The oyster casing represented as a modest testament to intelligence accumulated from both terrain and waters. Validation that nothing in endurance was ever truly discarded, and that even what was abandoned could construct the basis of fortitude. Cattail sprouts were a sustenance of scarcity periods collected from boggy ponds and wetlands when the harvests depleted. The young sprouts, ivory and delicate near the foundation, could be consumed raw or simmered, tasting subtly of cucumber and maize. They flourished where others perceived only vegetation, a concealed reserve of nourishment obscured in plain view. Gathering them meant venturing into mire and frigid water, severing each stalk manually. Prepared with salt or incorporated into cornmeal patties, they provided fiber, minerals, and promise. The cattail was bountiful. It yielded roots for flour, foliage for braiding, and sprouts for consuming. Its profusion made it a wordless companion to those who possessed little else. In the presence of starvation, these marsh plants became a salvation, a testament that endurance often flourishes quietly at the margin of hardship. Scorched sweet cornmeal patties were the wanderer's sustenance, constructed for longevity, not enjoyment. The mixture of milled corn, salt, and liquid was spread thin and heated until crisp and dark. dark, deliberately over-roasted to make the patties endure longer without decaying. They were rigid, charred, and part, but when immersed in stock or liquid, they relaxed into substantial meals again. Transportable and resilient, they could be enclosed in fabric and transported for days. For those who labored extended hours away from flame or hearth, these patties were vital nourishment, plain, robust, and dependable. The char was not a defect, but a tactic, preserving essence and vigor. Each patty conveyed a narrative of restraint of people who could not permit to squander a kernel. The aroma of toasted corn was recognizable and anchoring a connection between past and present workers. Each morsel was validation of resourcefulness created from necessity, a testament that even the most basic components could maintain great fortitude. These patties may not have been celebratory or tender, but they were sustenance that journeyed with you through adversity and endurance alike, nourishing body and resolve across limitless miles of hardship. Honey locust pod nectar was among those uncommon touches of confection that appeared like a wonder when sweetener was nothing but a recollection. The elongated brown pods of the honey locust tree were collected cautiously, split open, and simmered for hours in iron vessel until the liquid became dark and aromatic. Its essence was subtly like molasses with hints of smoke and soil, watery but profoundly gratifying. It demanded forbearance and firewood, two things never simple to relinquish, but the outcome delivered happiness to meals that might otherwise have been ordinary or acrid. A teaspoon in corn gruel or poured over ash patties could make a difficult day's toil feel slightly less severe. The nectar's fragrance permeated dwellings with heat, reminding households of improved seasons. The pod itself, once rejected by others, became a modest wonder of confection extracted straight from the terrain. For the enslaved, confection was not merely taste, it was promise concentrated into something they could grasp, distribute, and recall. In every droplet of nectar, there was a subdued deed of resistance, a method to forge solace when solace was withheld. Validation that resourcefulness could still make existence taste pleasant. Jerusalem Artichoke Reserve was a brilliant solution to starvation. Concealed right beneath the ground, these gnarled roots, also termed sunchokes, flourished wild and reproduced readily, making them a reliable sustenance when nothing else endured the freeze. Following harvest, they were interred in cool ground or sand cavities near the dwelling, extracted one by one as winter advanced. Raw, they were crunchy like water chestnuts. Simmered or roasted, they became tender and earthy, laden with heat. Unlike potatoes, they did not decay rapidly, and unlike maize, they demanded no field. They belonged to those who possessed the intelligence to look downward, not outward, to discover sustenance where others perceived vegetation. Households who maintained Jerusalem artichokes understood security in the most difficult months. Their essence was gentle, reassuring, and faintly sugary, a subdued compensation for preparation and attention. Each tuber excavated was a modest victory against deprivation, a silent affirmation that they would endure through another season, one root at a time. A testament that even in frozen ground, nourishment could still develop for those who understood where to search. Crab carapace stew was a dish created from what others discarded, the bones and casings left behind once the flesh was extracted. Along the shoreline, enslaved cooks discovered to extract essence from the most barren remnants. Fractured crab carapaces were simmered with onions, botanicals, and a portion of cornmeal or rice, producing a flavorful stock that smelled like the ocean. Occasionally, a single pincer or a fragment of flesh might appear, but most of the time it was just casings and salted liquid converted into nourishment. The stock was murky and saline, but it was heated and satisfying enough to extend for a household. The vapor ascended from the vessel, abundant and briny, spiraling into the atmosphere like a murmur of solace. The casings yielded their final trace of essence to the vessel, a ios, concluding contribution before being rejected again. What was once refused became sustenance through expertise and forbearance. It was the craft of endurance transformed into gastronomy, a testament to how profoundly people could extract existence from what persisted after everything else had been confiscated. In those vessels of crab carapace stew resided fortitude, validation that even barrenness could be converted into and nourishment when directed by understanding, promise, and the determination to persist. Wild onion and garlic blend was both sustenance and remedy, collected by those who understood the terrain as thoroughly as any physician. In moist meadows and waterfronts, the verdant shoots emerged freely, filling containers with essence. When provisions tasted bland or aged, simmered into broths, or crushed into mixture, the bulbs concealed harshness and aided combat ailments or illness. Their potent aroma permeated the atmosphere, indicating nourishment in a location where it was frequently limited. The people who collected them labored silently at daybreak, extracting the roots from the ground, thankful for the pungent fragrance that assured vigor. When simmered with legumes or greens, these modest plants provided meals, richness, and heat, reminding people of homeland, of something verdant and living. Combining wild onion and garlic with legumes or greens delivered a solace that was modest but intensely human, the heat of a recognizable essence. These foraged bulbs were validation that understanding was might, and endurance frequently relied on recalling the intelligence that nature murmured to those prepared to attend. In every vessel, flavored this manner, resided both restoration and resistance, the essence of existence continuing despite privation. A modest flame of honor and vigor concealed in every spoonful. Simmered sassafras foliage, known later as filet powder, were utilized long before gumbo became renowned. The delicate verdant foliage were collected fresh, dehydrated in the shadows, and crushed to a refined powder that could enrich stews and contribute an loamy aroma. It converted watery stocks into substantial meals and provided bland grains a flavor of woodland seasoning. This custom, shared by native and African cooks, was a convergence of endurance understanding, a merging of realms through sustenance. Filet possessed the capacity to convert remnants into something reassuring, its velvety consistency transforming requirement into refinement. In the cadence of preparation, the powder became a subdued connection between cultures, its application extending through coastal hearths and inland dwellings alike. It was not merely flavoring, it was narrative, remembrance, and creativity combined together. Long before the term Creole emerged on formulas, sassafras foliage conveyed the narrative of adjustment, of workers laboring together in the warmth of the region. Every pinch of powder was both essence and chronicle, blended quietly into the vessel and transmitted down through successive eras who never dismissed its value, a collective legacy of imagination derived from limitation. Sun-preserved crawfish tails were a wetland treasure maintained through daylight and duration. Inland from the shoreline, those who resided near marshes captured small crawfish in containers or braided traps, preparing them over gentle flames before extracting the flesh. The tails were arranged out on wooden planks and dehydrated in the sun until tough, ready to endure for months. Once reconstituted, they seasoned broths, rice, or cornmeal gruel with the essence of the bayou. Each portion was an act of meticulous labor, salting, dehydrating, protecting from pests, and each portion preserved away meant another dish secured. The atmosphere around the dehydrating frame smelled subtly of brine and char, and the pattern of rotating the tails became almost ceremonial. This sustenance was both conservation and readiness, a commitment against starvation's arrival. For people who could not depend on markets or consistent provisions, this method was autonomy made consumable. Like fish jerky, it possessed both salt and vigor, a trace of the water that provided it existence. Every preserved crawfish tail was a remembrance of ingenuity, a fragment of the wetland transformed into fortitude, an emblem of self-sufficiency extracted straight from the terrain's boundary. Charred pumpkin seeds were the subdued wonder of the harvest. Nothing squandered, everything utilized. After pumpkins were prepared or dehydrated, the seeds were washed, salted, and toasted gradually over glowing embers. Sometimes they were positioned in the smokehouse overnight, acquiring a profound essence that repelled pests and maintained them for weeks. The seeds were bundled in small fabric pouches, placed into pockets for extended days in the fields. Abundant in oil and protein, they provided vitality when meals were meager and days were extended. The subtle smokiness recalled people of autumn flames, of the aroma of the ground readying for dormancy. They were consumed during intervals between toil, one seed at a moment, a tiny solace against starvation. Mothers distributed them to children during tasks, instructing them to retain what others might discard away. What started as remnants became nourishment, a testament that endurance was not about plenty, but perception. Every seed embodied the intelligence of economy, the craft of discovering sustenance in what others discarded. disregarded. In that modest portion of char and brine was the chronicle of persistence itself, a subdued testament to how even the most minute offerings could maintain the human essence. Marsh grain patties were among the most ancient improvised cereals derived from wetland grains most people disregarded. Wild millet, a untamed grass with minuscule seeds, flourished dense in the bottomlands where other harvests faltered. Collecting it demanded time and determination, shaking stalks into containers until sufficient was accumulated. The grains were crushed with rocks blended with liquid and compressed into modest patties that were dehydrated in the sun. The outcome was pliable and earthy, satisfying the stomach when scarce else could. These patties were rigid but reliable, a dish that requested for exertion but provided vigor in exchange. Consumed alone or relaxed in stock, they maintained workers advancing through infinite hours of toil. Their plain essence possessed the gratification of something deserved, not bestowed. Preserved in fabric pouches, these patties endured for weeks and could be immersed again in stock or milk when accessible. They were plain, hearty, and maintaining sustenance derived entirely from observation and exertion. In each morsel was a fusion of nature's abundance and human fortitude, the variety of nourishment constructed quietly from labor rather than plenty, the essence of determination itself. Okra and tomato broth was a garden-derived mainstay that prospered in heated southern summers when vegetables were bountiful. Fresh okra pods selected before they became rigid were cut and cooked with mature tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers until the essences merged into a dense, flavorful broth. The okra's inherent thickening property provided the dish a reassuring, almost velvety consistency, while the tomatoes contributed acidity and luminosity. Flavored plainly with salt, pepper, and occasionally a trace of smoked protein for richness, this was a dish that could exist alone with cornbread or be presented alongside fish or poultry. In African American hearths, it was a method to maximize backyard gardens and extend a modest quantity of protein into a satisfying dish. It could be prepared entirely vegetarian or enhanced with fragments of bacon or ham hock depending on what was accessible. The appeal of okra and tomato broth resided in its flexibility. Each home possessed its own interpretation, frequently shaped by what was cultivating just beyond the kitchen entrance. Though it persists, recognized in some southern dwellings, its prominence has diminished as fresh garden preparation has become less prevalent in everyday existence. Secret component, but won them over with every tender morsel, becoming a budget-conscious wonder in the 1970s. Pantry essentials of flour, cocoa powder, and sweetener were blended with the abundant spoonful of mayonnaise, whose eggs and oil provided the cake a delicate texture without additional butter. Prepared in a plain rectangular vessel, it emerged dark and smooth, permeating the kitchen with an abundant cocoa fragrance. A swift frosting of powdered sweetener and milk or a swirl of chocolate buttercream transformed it into a confection suitable for celebrations, bake sales, or late evening delicacies. Households adored how the formula conserved money while producing a consistency matching any elegant bakery cake. Visitors frequently speculated at the secret, but seldom accepted it, which made presenting it even more enjoyable. Chocolate mayonnaise cake recalled everyone that resourcefulness and a trace of bravery could convert an ordinary weeknight into something luxurious, demonstrating that pleasant flavor does not require costly components when imagination guides the direction. Toasted sassafras roots yielded an aromatic infusion with an inherently sugary, faintly spicy essence that invigorated the mood and provided gentle stimulation. Enslaved foragers meticulously excavated the young roots of the sassafras tree, cleansed them, and roasted them over moderate warmth to extract their aromatic oils. When infused in hot liquid, the roasted roots produced a profound reddish infusion with traces of vanilla and citrus. This infusion was savored both for its essence and for customary therapeutic applications, illustrating a fusion of African and indigenous understanding about native botanicals. Following emancipation, sassafras tea became a cherished Southern drink, ultimately serving as the foundation essence for the initial root beers. The tradition reveals how a plain foraged root influenced an enduring American essence that reaches far beyond its modest origins. Toasted sassafras roots demonstrate how comprehending the woodland's contributions permitted communities to produce beverages of solace and cultural importance from components freely provided by the terrain itself. Fried green tomato po' boys converted immature tomatoes into a sandwich that resembled pure coastal radiance enclosed in crispy cornmeal. Substantial cuts of firm green tomatoes were coated in seasoned cornmeal and fried until their borders crisped and their centers relaxed just enough to discharge a vibrant acidity. Stacked high on tender French loaf with a spread of remoulade and a portion of shredded lettuce, they became a preferred choice along Gulf Coast avenues where shrimp vessels docked and melodies drifted from open windows. Vendors frequently offered them at fish gatherings and festivals when seafood costs climbed too elevated, demonstrating that a garden vegetable could fulfill the need as effectively as any oyster or crab. Households recalled the aroma of heated oil and the sizzle of cornmeal batter while queuing for a sandwich that merged economy and festivity. Today, fast food establishments attempt to replicate the essence, but they cannot seize the subdued enchantment of fresh garden tomatoes selected before maturing, fried in backyard hearths, and distributed among neighbors who recognize the worth of every morsel. Braised okra with cornmeal dumplings was a dish that merged economy with reassurance in a manner that remained with households for decades. Okra, frequently cultivated in backyard gardens, entered a simmering vessel with onions, tomatoes, and stock until it softened into a dense broth. My grandmother would combine plain cornmeal mixture, drop spoonfuls into the bubbling vessel, and allow the dumplings to prepare until they expanded into delicate morsels. The consistency of the okra enriched the broth naturally, providing it substance without requiring flour or cream. Each vessel possessed the essence of the garden, loamy and maintaining, with dumplings that satisfied the stomachs of weary workers. It was sustenance that originated straight from the ground and extended further than its components implied. Children matured consuming this dish as a matter of routine, yet it became part of the pattern of endurance. In the 1960s, braised okra with cornmeal dumplings was a mainstay that embodied both economy and resourcefulness, converting modest vegetables and flour into something deserving of honor at the dinner table. Roasted raccoon with sweet potatoes was a substantial, profoundly flavorful dish that illustrated the resourcefulness of rural African American hunting communities. When commercial meat was limited or too expensive, raccoon offered a supply of fresh protein for those who understood how to prepare it correctly. The raccoon flesh was meticulously cleaned, immersed to eliminate any potent essences, and then flavored with botanicals, onions, and seasonings before being roasted low and gradual. Sweet potatoes cut substantial and positioned around the flesh absorbed the flavorful liquids as they cooked, producing a sugary and briny combination that permeated the dwelling with a compelling fragrance. This dish was not merely about sustenance, it was about fellowship and the expertise of converting what the terrain offered into a dish worth assembling for. Frequently prepared during the colder periods following a successful hunt, it united people together around the table to exchange narratives and heat. While today most people have never sampled raccoon, those who matured with it recall its abundance, the supple consistency, and the manner the sweet potatoes complemented its earthiness. It was beyond just supper. It was a testament of self-reliance and ingenious preparation transmitted down through successive eras. Chile D, centerpiece of heated weather gatherings, a pale white vision that refreshed the warmest summer evenings. A delicate sponge cake prepared in a large rectangular vessel offered the foundation, while a smooth coconut frosting created with evaporated milk and sweetened shredded coconut covered the surface like fresh snow. Following chilling, the cake absorbed the frosting's abundant essence, transforming each morsel into a delicate tropical delicacy. Presented in ample portions at backyard gatherings or family reunions, it provided sweetness without weightiness, ideal following barbecue or spicy foods. Visitors appreciated the manner the coconut captured the illumination, glistening like miniature crystals as the cake was divided. In African American homes of the 1970s, coconut sheet cake became a seasonal preferred choice that indicated festivity and welcome. Its plainness and capacity to nourish a gathering made it a sensible selection, while its remarkable presentation guaranteed it was recalled long beyond the final portion vanished from the platter. Lemon chess pie radiated with luminous flavor. Wild grape concentrate linked plantation hearths to the indigenous plenty of the American South. Muscadine and scuppernong grapes flourished untended along barriers and woodland margins, offering a reliable late summer harvest. Enslaved laborers collected the bunches and pressed them manually to produce a acidic liquid that could be cultured slightly for an invigorating beverage or simmered into a sticky concentrate employed to flavor grains and greens. This method reflected West African customs of utilizing fruit reductions to enliven savory dishes. Following emancipation, muscadine wine and homemade grape preserves became signatures of Southern culinary traditions, and small farms continue to produce them today. The deliberate collecting and gradual simmering demanded forbearance and expertise, characteristics that characterize the preparation of those who created the maximum of every wild supply. Wild grape concentrate represents both a functional formula and a testament to how African American cooks fused Old World methods with New World components, leaving an essence that persists to influence regional preserves and drinks across the Carolinas and Georgia. Hoghead terrine was a victory of ingenuity, converting every portion of the animal into a dish of remarkable refinement. Following a hog was slaughtered, the head was cooked gradually with onions, botanicals, and seasonings until the flesh separated from the bone. The abundant stock was filtered and cooled, solidifying into a flavorful aspic that contained delicate fragments of flesh and gentle flavoring. Cut and presented cold with crackers or loaf, it became a specialty at assemblies where nothing was squandered and essence was honored. Creating it demanded forbearance and expertise, with households exchanging methods that differed from one home to the following. Children observed the gradual procedure with a combination of intrigue and wonder, discovering that economy could produce unexpected delights. Today, few people undertake the effort of hoghead terrine, and commercial versions lack the distinction of the homemade original, but its chronicle persists as a testament to fortitude and the profound regard African American cooks maintained for every offering the animal yielded. Simmered turnips with cornbread fragments was another manner households extended inexpensive vegetables into complete meals. Turnips were simple to cultivate and frequently distributed, their potent essence mellowed by simmering them until supple. My grandmother spooned the heated turnips into vessels and crowned them with crumbled cornbread, the loaf absorbing the liquid until it became substantial enough for supper. It was ordinary sustenance, yes, but it maintained stomachs satisfied on evenings when protein was limited. The sharpness of the turnips softened with time and flavoring, and the cornbread provided every morsel substance and reassurance. Children might have complained, but they consumed their portion because there was no space for squandering. In the 1960s, this dish was prevalent across hearths that depended on resourcefulness to manage finances. It was a plain pairing, yet it possessed honor because it embodied endurance. Simmered turnips with cornbread fragments may not have been elaborate, but it maintained households united through difficult periods. Ember-roasted sweet potatoes were a plain yet memorable delicacy. Whole sweet potatoes were positioned directly into the heated embers of a wood-burning hearth or outdoor flame pit, gradually roasting until their exteriors blackened and their interiors caramelized. The outcome was a tender, charred sweetness that required no sweetener or butter to excel. In African American homes, particularly in rural regions without modern ovens, this approach was both sensible and flavorful. The aroma of roasting sweet potatoes would permeate the atmosphere, attracting children and adults alike to the hearth. Once prepared, they could be divided open and consumed right from the exterior, frequently as a snack on cold evenings. This was sustenance connected to forbearance and custom, a testament that sometimes the plainest preparations produce the most abundant essences. Today, with most preparation transferred indoors and convenience foods supplanting old approaches, ember-roasted sweet potatoes are seldom created, but for those who sampled them, they remain unrivaled. Molasses spice biscuits possess the profound essences of gula and low-country custom into modern hearths, each chewy morsel reflecting centuries of coastal legacy. Dark molasses combined with brown sweetener to produce a dough abundant with heat, while cinnamon, ginger, and cloves saturated the atmosphere as the biscuits baked. Coated in coarse sweetener before entering the oven, they emerged crackled and aromatic, their centers tender and slightly adhesive. The essence balanced sugary and spicy with a persistent note of caramel that made them compelling alongside a glass of cold milk or a cup of tea. In the 1970s, these biscuits linked generations, providing a concrete connection to the essences of forebears who baked with what the terrain and waters offered. Households distributed them during holiday assemblies or tranquil evenings alike, relishing the manner custom persisted in every spice-laden morsel. molasses spice biscuits demonstrated that a plain delicacy can possess significant importance, converting an ordinary snack into a festivity of chronicle, remembrance, and lasting sweetness. Sweet sheep sorrel broth delivered a welcome burst of luminous essence following months of substantial grains and salted protein remnants. This prevalent wild plant, with its arrow-shaped foliage and inherent citrusy acidity, flourished freely in meadows and along forest margins. Enslaved foragers selected the young foliage early in spring, washed them thoroughly, and cooked them with liquid and a portion of onions or garlic if accessible. The outcome was a delicate, invigorating stock abundant in vitamin C and a mild tartness that revived weary palates. African culinary customs frequently valued acidic greens, and this broth illustrated that preference while also fulfilling an essential nutritional function in combating scurvy. Following emancipation, sheep sorrel remained a preferred wild green in many rural settlements, utilized in infusions and plain broths that honored the emergence of milder weather. Today, foragers continue to seek it for its acidic essence and health advantages. Sheep sorrel broth represents as a subdued illustration of how attentive observation of the terrain converted common vegetation into an lasting component of Southern culinary legacy. Sweet potato tart with brown sugar meringue adorned holiday tables with a splendor that equaled its essence. Velvety mashed sweet potatoes combined with heated seasonings produced a filling as abundant as any custard poured into a flaky handcrafted shell. The finishing element was a cloud of meringue whipped with brown sweetener until caramel-scented peaks developed and toasted gently in the oven. Households reserved the initial portion for esteemed visitors or elders, a symbol of regard and fondness. The tart possessed the sweetness of the southern ground and the capability of generations who comprehended how to extend plain components into festivity. Children licked the mixing vessels spotless while parents observed the meringue ascend, a collective moment of expectation before the banquet. Over duration, commercial tarts and instant mixtures diminished the custom. But those who recall the heated fragrance of brown sugar meringue recognize that this confection is beyond sustenance. It is a recollection of household affection, forbearing hands, and the subdued honor of handcrafted splendor. If these narratives of endurance foods instructed you something novel, express your reflections in the remarks. Transmit this chronicle forward with a like and subscribe so the past never experiences hunger again.